welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is the 7th of October 2019. Tonight's topic: Fed repo collateral equals agency mortgage-backed securities, agency debt, and U.S. Treasuries. Now, the reason I want to cover this, now I've already covered this topic 3 times, but it appears that there's a lot of sloppy work out there and a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and just plain hyperbole about the Fed repo market. Now, I understand no one's an expert in this, and people like to get clicks and they like to create an audience. And of course, anytime you mention JP Morgan or the Fed, you can get a lot of people riled up because they're the evil empire. And you basically can say anything you want about the Fed or JP Morgan. You can say JP Morgan's buying silver eagles, JP Morgan's stacking silver, JP Morgan's evil, the Fed killed Kennedy. I mean, you could say anything about those entities and people will just cheer it on, and that's what they want to hear. Now, the latest is this thing with the Fed and its repo operation. Now, granted, the repo operation is a unique, to say the least, operation. It does show that there's signs of issues in the financial system. But I've been hearing so much nonsense that the Fed is just taking any collateral, that they're just bailing out the banks. That is not what is happening. Now, I have no trouble with speculation. There's nothing wrong with speculating. But when you claim you don't know what the Fed is doing, that's true. No one knows what the Fed is doing. But the point is, we do know what the Fed says they are doing, if you at least bother to look. Now, we have covered this, as I mentioned this 3 times already, and we've gone through the mechanics of what the Fed is doing, setting up the repo facility, offering $75 billion in exchange for collateral, and they're exchanging that to 29 primary dealers. Now, the Fed, instead of getting your information secondhand from whatever website or whatever YouTube channel, go to the Fed's website. That's what I've done all along in these 3 somewhat exposés I've done on this. So this one, Repo, how the Fed works with foreign banks to implement monetary policy. We talked about in that particular YouTube video, BitChute video, how the Fed works with 29 primary dealers. And who are the primary dealers? We went through that. We're going to go through them again tonight. Half of them are overseas. The purpose of the primary dealers is to work to keep the Fed's monetary policy where they want it to be. And the Fed's monetary policy right now is looking to keep short-term interest rates from spiking. So they work with these primary dealers. And the last time we revisited this topic was just a couple of days ago, called Fed Repo Operations, Much Ado About Nothing. And in that one, I advise you to go back and listen to all 3 or look at the blog post. There's charts and everything. It explains what the Fed is doing. They're not just buying any old collateral. And a lot of people say, how do you know? People are saying they're buying CLOs, they're buying toxic assets, they're bailing out the banks. They don't know what they're talking about. Because you can speculate that that's what's going on, but if you don't even know what the Fed says they are doing, it's very difficult just to make up and speculate. So I don't know what they're doing. No one knows what they're doing. So we might as well just say what they're doing is bailing out the banks and buying anything and everything that they want. And everyone cheers it on and says, this is madness. Oh my goodness, this is nuts. Well, first of all, you have to know what's going on. Or at least what the Fed says that they're doing. Now, we're not going to relitigate all of that. We're just going to go back and say, what is the Fed doing? Again, it's offering a repo facility to the 29 primary dealers who are, and I'll give you the list, and they've all been made public before. They're on the New York Fed's website. We've gone through them a few times. I've published a list. Here is the list of the primary dealers. I even indicated that many of these banks, we don't know who they are. Yes, we do know who they are. We don't know which ones are buying or which ones are participating and by how much, but we do know who they are. Now, we also know, or at least we know what the Fed says they're accepting as collateral. It's not like we don't know and we have to guess and say it's CLOs and toxic waste and it's a bailout of bad assets on. No. What the Fed says. Now let's go straight to the Fed's source. Now you can say you don't trust the Fed. That's fine. But don't say you don't know. So you just invent something and then say, well, okay, well, I'm going to believe. And then as part of your research, I'm going to believe what somebody just speculated on without even first checking to see what the, quote, official story is. I mean, once you get to that point, you're basically saying, I'm willing to believe whatever I hear on YouTube instead of what I'm willing to at least use as a starting point, which is what the Fed is actually saying they're doing and publishing what they're doing. Not only have they announced what they're doing, they've published who they're doing it with and how much they're doing it each and every day and which securities they're using as collateral. Now, repo and reverse repo agreements. It says the New York Fed authorized by the Federal Open Market Committee to conduct repo and reverse repo operations for the system open market account to the extent necessary to carry out the most recent FOMC directive. That's the monetary policy. Keep the low short-term interest rates low. Then it says the New York Fed's open market trading desk will execute these repo, reverse repo operations in the tri-party repo market. Now, it explains what repurchase agreements are. The repos are conducted only with primary dealers. Who are the primary dealers? We don't know. Oh, it could be anybody. No. They list the primary dealers. It's no secret. Reverse repos are also dealt with primary dealers, and they have some expanded net of reverse repo counterparties. Now, in a repo transaction, the New York desk buys treasuries. We know what they are. Agency debt, we're going to get into what that is, and agency mortgage-backed securities, MBS, from counterparties subject to an agreement to resell the securities at a later date. I saw today there was a channel saying, oh my goodness, we didn't know, but now we know. I got a link and it shows that they're buying mortgage-backed securities. And a lot of people think mortgage-backed securities means the stuff that they bought in 2000, some of the, what kind of drove the financial crisis of 2008 and 9, where mortgage-backed securities, these were mortgages that were bundled up by banks themselves, dragged over to the rating agency, got a AAA rating, slapped on them, and then they went bust. So, the natural inclination to think is, look, it's happening. The Federal Reserve is buying mortgage-backed securities. Now we know. No. They're not buying what you think are mortgage-backed securities. They're buying agency mortgage-backed securities. A huge, huge difference. Now, why is the Fed taking on agency mortgage-backed securities, treasuries, and agency debt? Why? Because, in their own words, it is economically similar to a loan collateralized by securities having a value higher than the loan to protect the desk against market and credit risk. The Fed is taking no risk in taking on these. Why? Because treasuries, whether you want to believe it or not, are considered the most secure and liquid asset you can buy. Why? Because they're backed by, quote, the full faith and credit of the United States, which is considered to be impeccable, despite what you hear on pumper channels about the dollar is toilet paper, dollar collapse, game over, game changer, multipolar world, China to crush the dollar, and all that other nonsense. Second thing that they're taking on are agency mortgage-backed securities. Now, what are agency mortgage-backed securities? There's a big difference between an agency mortgage-backed security and one that's bundled together by a bank. Agency mortgage-backed securities are basically Ginnie Mae, Government National Mortgage Association securities that are issued by a government-backed entity. They're backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, and so they can't default. Theoretically, it's the same thing as U.S. Treasuries. Now, what I don't know, and there is a little ambiguity here, whether they're also including Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, those two have been privatized or somewhat, I would guess, government-sponsored. They could default. They did default in the past, but we don't know there. So it's not like they're buying, and most likely they're not buying those. Now, again, I'll speculate, and I'll say where I don't know, but I won't just flat out just come out and start foaming at the mouth that the Fed is taking on. Who knows what they're taking on, and then start speculating on all the garbage they might be taking on. Again, you could speculate that all you want, but don't say you don't know at least what the Fed is saying that they're taking on. They're saying they're taking on the best collateral there is, which are U.S. Treasuries, agency mortgage-backed securities, and agency bonds. Now, agency bonds are very similar. They're backed by the FHA. They could be backed by Ginnie Mae, the the Government National Mortgage Association, same thing. They're not going to have any risk attached to them other than the failure of the United States. So, this is not a bailout of the banks. They're not buying CLOs. And I hear all the time, how do you know? Well, yeah, I don't know. But what I do know is that anyone who's claiming that they're buying or they're bailing out the banks, they don't know either. And they're just essentially speculating and insisting that because we don't know, that somehow this is what they're doing. All right, let me see if I have anything else. I don't want to make a big deal, but the thing is, this has been going on for weeks. And yes, it's an unusual situation, but it doesn't help when people just, because they say they don't know, they don't bother to check at least what the Fed is saying they're doing, at least, and we've been publishing, I did a chart the other day that showed, where did I get it from? I got it from the Fed, showed how much they're buying and what they're buying each and every day. And I put a chart together. I'm going to show it to you tonight again, but here's the latest. Today, transparency right on the Federal Reserve Bank of New York saying what they bought. They bought $5.6 billion in Treasuries, and I have to show it on 2 slides here. And they bought 36 more worth of Treasuries, 11 in mortgage-backed securities, no agency debt. That's agency mortgage-backed securities. So that's $47 billion plus the 5. So today they bought about $52 billion worth of securities. These are short term. The other night I showed you the balance sheet. I showed you where they show up. And I also showed that they've made available over $1 trillion so far. So why don't they have $1 trillion increase on the balance sheet? Well, it's because all this stuff is short term. It gets thrown back into the system in reverse repos. And on we go. Again, this is not a harbinger of recession, although we could have a recession. It doesn't mean that the Fed is doing QE or will do QE, although they may do QE and probably will. They've talked about doing QE. This is an issue which can be analyzed as on the basis of the available information without making up stuff that this is some type of bank bailout, that it means 10 other things that it doesn't mean, that the Fed is buying CLOs, garbage, toxic assets, will continue to do so. It's a bailout. None of the above. Does it mean that the Fed hasn't done that kind of stuff, won't do that kind of stuff? No. It just means you cannot ascribe what is happening other than speculating. But you can't speculate from, you shouldn't start your speculation at the point where you're just making it up. Because you say you don't know, and there's no way of knowing. If the Fed doesn't do an audit, how do we know? Well, they do tell you some stuff. So I would start with what the Fed does tell you. They tell you what securities they're willing to make the facility available, and they're telling you how much each day they've made available. They tell you who they're making available to. They don't say exactly which banks, but we know so. And there's nothing, again, I'm not against speculation. I'm against this wide-eyed, wild speculation. Everyone gets all riled up, and then they just think that the Fed is running a pawn shop. And it goes back to the same thing. You can't prove they're not. No, I guess I can't. It's the same with J.P. Morgan's buying hundreds of zillions of American Silver Eagles. No proof to that whatsoever, but you can prove that they're not. And then you get into the whole, well, I'd rather believe this guy over that guy. Okay, you can believe who you want. I was trained in, I want to talk about my background, but I started my career as a lawyer. I made the law review, which means you have to get the top grades. And then once you're in the law review, you're required to write an article. It has to be heavily footnoted. You can't just say stuff without backing it up. And I've kept to that type of training. I know this isn't a full-time job for any of us, but just to start foaming at the mouth and repeating stuff that you hear, it rubs me the wrong way. I see it all the time. Gold, back yuan. China just announced, and you say, where's the announcement? Oh, you must be working for the banks. You must be a shill. No, I just want to know where you saw China announce. Well, I heard Jim Rickards say it. Well, where did he hear? Well, it doesn't matter. He's an expert. No, it does matter. I want to know where the Chinese announcement is that they said they were going to do a gold back yuan. Well, you're a shill. Yeah, okay. Anyway, I was trained to research, go to the source at least. If the Fed is saying that they're doing something, go to the Fed's website and take a look. Now it doesn't mean you have to read it and say, well, there's all the facts I need to know, but that's where you start. You don't say, I don't know anything, so I might as well just invent whatever, and that's what all the channels are doing. They're going nuts. They're saying that the Fed is doing all types of stuff. They're doing QE. They're bailing out the banks. This means there's a recession coming. We don't know how much they're doing. We don't know who they're lending it to. We don't know what collateral they're taking. Well, the Fed's told us what they say they're taking and who they're taking it from. Again, you don't have to believe that, but I think everyone has done a disservice if you make it sound like no one knows because the Fed won't tell you and the Fed hasn't been audited, and that means there's no gold at Fort Knox. Oh, okay. And then the Fed killed Kennedy, and for good measure, they killed Lincoln, and there's too much of that going on. Now, I want to talk about something more interesting. Something fun happened today, and look what I got in the post today. Now, that's some fun stuff there, and I'm very, very happy, and I want to thank the Smaulgld subscriber who sent that to me. Now that is, we talk about gold and silver, and we don't really talk about other precious commodities, of which you're looking at 3. First one is the Rovna Amber. That is Ukrainian amber. And she sent me some information about each of these items. It's very fascinating. I very much appreciate it. It's not just the value of these items, but there should be channels about amber and channels about these gemstones. They're just as interesting as gold and silver. So this is Ukrainian amber. And they really didn't mind it. Amber comes from the Baltics. That's where you hear about amber. And apparently amber deposits are estimated to be as large as those in the Baltics. And they come in a wide variety of colors. Now this one's a beautiful piece. That's an interesting thing about amber. Obviously these can't necessarily be used as money because why? They're not fungible. They're not all the same, but they are unique and they are rare-ish. And I think they're very nice, and I will keep this. It's not really very heavy. I'll keep this with my silver dimes that I also received as a gift. That P.O. box is very nice. Now, the next one is it's hard to see. That is a Russian dematoid garnet. And from what I read, that the spectrum on this is more brilliant than a ruby or a sapphire. Now, you really can't see from that picture. I do have another picture. It's very hard to get a good picture with my iPhone. Here's, I don't know if you can see there. Now, these particular garnets, the dematoid garnets, are from Russia, and they're generally small. This is a very, very small piece, and it says the dematoid garnet is the rarest of all garnet varieties and is valued by collectors for its exceptional brilliance and fire. You really can't see it there, but it is. Where did I put it? It is very brilliant looking. I showed it to my wife. Make a brilliant ring. It's a little smallish, but it focuses the eye. I wish I had a better picture, but that's the best I can do there. And these have, here it is. It has an unusually high refractive index, higher than ruby and sapphire, and this is one of the reasons for its impressive brilliance. Yes, indeed. It looks like it's on fire all the time. So that is a very beautiful gem there. Now, the last one is a Siberian amethyst. Let's check out what that looks like. And that is this one here on the right. Well, that is a semi-precious variety of quartz that is valued for the varying shades of translucent purple hues. Now, I read that this particular amethyst in purple was so rare that it was worth so much. And then they found a lot of them in Brazil, I think in the mid-1800s. But these are Siberian. This is a Siberian amethyst. This is known for its vivid, deep collector grade purple hue with blue and red shades throughout. This type of purple amethyst is found only in the Ural Mountains. So this particular subscriber sent me, these are Russian, Ural Mountain, Ukrainian area natural resources, actually, but precious gems and quartz and the amber there. So very interesting indeed, and much appreciated. To get a package like this in the mail is very exciting. I had to get a didn't fit in the box, so they had to give me a what do you call it? A key to go to another locker to get this particular package. But I'm going to wrap it up now and see what you guys are saying. Again, thank you for this. I don't mean to be what's the word? Brusque with some of my colleagues who produce these types of videos, but it seems to me it's either lazy or disingenuous that you can't go and look and find out at least what the source is saying instead of parroting gold back yuan or just saying, I don't know, so I'm just going to make something up, because people are willing to believe. Once you have a following, people think that, well, this person's an expert or this person's done his research. Well, if people actually think you do your research, you owe them to do the research. Can't just start making up stuff and saying, well, we don't know, and from my experience, it must be this. Well, that doesn't cut it, for me at least. If I don't know something, what I try to do is I make charts. I try to get information. And then sometimes when I present information that contradicts a narrative, you don't believe the official numbers. I say, well, I'm skeptical of all numbers, but sometimes I'm going to go with official numbers over numbers that are just clearly made up and repeated on YouTube. All right, let's see where you are. Live chat. Roger's here. It's Repo Madness time. Yeah, of course. Professor Curtis, Urban Treasure Hunter, is here. Good to see you. Tricky Guy, press 1 if you want phrase game changer to be a federal offense or forbidden to use within 1,000 feet of a school. The reason overused by a disgruntled lawyer. I wonder what that you know what? It's interesting, the word disgruntled. It usually is in front of, first of all, what is a gruntled person? If somebody is gruntled. How you doing today? Yeah, I'm pretty gruntled. How you doing today? Well, I'm disgruntled. I'm very disgruntled. Tricky Guy, how do we validate the actual total when it comes QE? Can we believe? Here we go. The official announcement. This is what happens when you binge watch YouTube videos of people all saying the same thing. Can we believe any announcements? Why trust the Fed on anything? Okay, so just make stuff up. Go ahead, just make it up. Why trust anything? Let's just believe that the Fed makes everything up. Let's believe it doesn't even exist. I mean, once you get to that point, you might as well just throw your hands up and just say, I'm just going to believe in the road to Roomba. And I'm just going to buy gold and silver. No, I'm just going to buy silver because the gold-silver ratio is unsustainable. It's the greatest wealth transfer that's going to happen this decade. And it's the biggest change in the paradigm. And yoga pants and gold and silver. And your mind gets scrambled once you start thinking like that. All right, let's see. Tricky Guy, I publicly confess I was in the thrall of the myth of Morgan silver hoarding, and Luce saved me by demanding I prove my assertions. That's what gruntled attorneys will do for you, Tricky Guy. Luce saved me on the spot that day. Pumper allure gone. Yeah, but I will say, Tricky Guy, you hung on to the narrative. For the longest time, you kept saying, yeah, but it's still, if it gets people into the metals, it's a good thing. And I said, no, it's not. If you get people into something on the wrong, on the wrong assumption or misinformation or false information, that's not a good thing. It's not good. It's not good to get people into precious metals, telling them they're going to skyrocket or telling them that it's a game over and game changer, and when it's not. There's reasons to buy gold and silver, but some of this nonsense that they tell you, they're not good reasons. And in fact, you will end up being disgruntled. You'll be a disgruntled silver owner if you bought for the reasons they told you to buy. Roger Henley, you got a pet rock in the post? Nope. Very old chicken nugget. I'm right on time, Smaulgld, says Fiona. Generous gifts. That's right, Pablo. We have the best we have a very small group on Smaulgld. Today I've some guy wrote on the in the comment. I just actually deleted it and just booted him from the channel. I don't want to hear from people anymore. So, they just if they hear something that they don't want to hear, even if it's true, then they try to they want to tell me they've unsubscribed. It's like, I don't care. You don't having you as a subscriber isn't doing me any good. You don't want to hear what I want to say. You don't send me gemstones. So why do I care that you've unsubscribed? Like that's damaging me. So if you don't repeat what Mike Maloney says, then I don't want to hear it anymore. Okay. There's plenty of people who repeat what Mike Maloney says, and there's plenty of people telling you about repo madness and making up stuff. Go ahead and listen to them. I don't really care. That's my point, is this channel exists for people who like it. If you don't like it and you want to be told a bunch of nonsense, you want to be told the road to Roomba or whatever else, then go listen to that stuff. You want to be told it's unsustainable and multipolar world and gold back yuan and dollar collapse and China to crush the dollar and on and on and on, and go listen to it. Unsustainable, mathematically certain, COMEX default, COMEX collapse, Schmiete, have at it. All right, let's see what else we have here tonight. Yes, well, 8Zilla. So where are the actual repayments of these repos, or any due? Okay, if you go to the site, you can read all about it. They talk about the repos and the reverse repos. You see, if you really just want to look at it on the surface and just listen to somebody complain and say, oh, this is outrageous. We don't even know if the Fed has done $10 trillion worth of repos already. They have collateralized loan obligation. They've taken all the toxic debt off of every bank. No, they show you what they're doing. I've showed the balance sheet the other night. Now, you could say you don't believe the balance sheet, but the balance sheet doesn't show $1 trillion worth of increase of balance sheet assets. And by the way, these assets are good assets, at least what they say they are. They are the top assets: agency debt, agency mortgage-backed securities, and U.S. Treasuries. All right, William Birkenroad just came back from Prague. Fiona Whalen Smaulgld. Well, I didn't want to call out Fiona by name, but she's now taking credit for having sent the package. And yes, indeed, she did like the Dematoid, but you don't have to send me a bigger one. We were thinking of making a ring out of it. It's very beautiful. My wife was over the moon when she saw both of these. She is a fan of these gems. And also, we were talking about getting some amber, just because there seems to be something, I don't know, very, just holding amber just seems to be, it's like soothing, like holding a silver. I don't know, it's very nice. But thank you very much again, Fiona. But William Birkenroad said, I just came back from Prague and purchased a Czech Republic garnet, and I got one for my daughter. Brilliant, available mined outside of Prague. Whereas Barry says he likes the amethyst. Yeah, that purple is a unique purple. Again, these pictures, I took them with my iPhone. There's not much I can do, but I'm holding them here. And it's also, I don't know if these are, I don't know how they do, like with diamonds, they cut them. These look also like somehow they've been created into a certain size, but they are indeed nice. Tricky guy, I know how to get Lou to love me. Pretty rocks. I'm sending Lou a box of gravel. No, if you can afford the postage, I'm sure they'll pay for it. Tricky guy. Tricky guy, you've been very generous in the past as well, so I do want to thank you. And we have a very good banter. I'm glad you're back. I think I bantered him away for a while, but he's back. When Lou yells at me, I feel like a doofus in law school class. Love it. I didn't know you went to law school, Tricky guy. All right, let's see. Bosch car batteries with silver them are set to skyrocket, say. Fiona Smaulgld, I had something in a small envelope. Did you get it? I got a note, and I got also I also got a postal order. Is that what you're talking about? Postal money order, which I do want to thank you for as well. I didn't want to advertise that on the... And then, if you give me permission, I'll read the note if you want me to. I can read that too. When Lou says Mike Maloney, I hear Mike Baloney. Why do you hear Mike Baloney? I think Lou is subtly doing this on purpose in a passive-aggressive attack on Pumper. Prove me wrong. No, I'm actually saying Steven Crowder when I say Mike Baloney. All right, David Dalton. Regardless of what gets posted as collateral, doesn't a net increase to the balance sheet and a net increase to the money supply? If so, what does that become a problem? Okay. Do you realize how little? It's $170 billion right now. You realize how little that is in terms of the $14 trillion of cash that's out there right now? I mean, that's not a good thing. But the way I look at it is all they're doing is changing the tenor of the reserve. So look at it this way, David. If you have $100 in a bond, right? So that's money that's already been allocated. So you spent your money to buy that bond, right? And now you owe rent, okay? And Lou happens to have $100 because he sold his gemstones. Just kidding. He has got $100, and you come to me and you say, I got to pay my rent. I need $100. I'll give you this bond as collateral, and I'll be getting paid next week, and I'm going to come back and get the bond. And I say, that's all right. Here. So I take the bond. I hold on to it. I give you $100. Really is not much more creative because the bond is now out of the system. The bond's already been paid for, and then the bond goes back, and then the repo happens, and it's not the same thing as printing up money and buying stuff for newly issued. You see the difference, David? So for example, when, let's say that, or for stuff that's gone bad, because the stuff that's gone bad is supposed to leave the system. So let's say you come to me and you say, Louis, I need $100. And I say, what do you got as collateral? You go, I don't really have anything. I got this old war bond, and it's not worth anything. It's worth like 10 cents on the dollar. And I say, yeah, give it to me. And I take it from you, and I give you the $100, and then I say, you don't owe me. You're fine. I'll just go cash this in. I'll put it on my wall. And I'm out. That actually, I added $100 into the system because I extinguished your debt that really shouldn't have been extinguished. But if all I do is swap $100 for $100 good collateral, and then it gets swapped back, no new money's been added. What I've done in the other case, though, is I added the $100 to the system that shouldn't have been added because your bond should have gone away and I actually paid for it. When the Fed does that, that's more concerning if they buy, as they did, and as the U.S. Treasury did, when they buy bad debt. That's money that should have left the system. So it's inflationary to the extent that you don't get the deflation of letting that bad money go bad. But when all they're doing is exchanging good, already issued agency mortgage-backed securities and Treasury securities, and remember, they're doing this with the primary dealers who they work with to try to manipulate the price. The real answer is all of this is bad. This highlights that the Fed basically manipulates the entire financial system. I don't deny that, but you don't have to make up what they're doing. We know what they're doing. It's bad enough as explained. All right. Dr. Mardesco. The word electricity comes from the Greek word amber. Electrum. Well, that's nice to know. Well, I'm glad we started a conversation here on gems. Thank you, Fiona. I mean, it's very interesting. I don't want to say anything about... Well, I don't know much about gems, and my wife does, but she's not. I don't want to say. Well, I'm going to say it. I'm not going to say it, but I already said it. Women tend to know more about gems than men do. Sorry about that. Okay. I guess historically there's a reason for that. Small gems. All right. Roger Henley at the museum. 3 young ladies showing me the Garnet collection. A resident said the mines are 70 kilometers outside of Prague. Brilliant. All right. Tricky Guy says, I didn't go to law school. I saw the film Paper Chase, so that makes me a valid authority in this matter. Okay. I read that book after I went to law school, and I was like, yeah, it was pretty much what it was like. I mean, the intense competition for grades and so on. That guy didn't make it. He did not make the guy who wrote the book, 1L. He did not make the law review. Tricky Guy. Given the influence the Fed has on Wall Street, the Fed reports have to be intended to control the narrative. Absolutely. Tricky Guy's making a very good point. He's saying Given the influence the Fed has on Wall Street, the Fed's reports have to be intended to control the narrative as much as it is to give info. Correct. But here's the thing. The narrative becomes what things are. You know that, tricky guy. So when alternative media just makes up a narrative, they're doing the same thing. That's what I did dislike. And also, when the Fed gives out information, they call it forward guidance. They're not shy. They say that's what they're doing. I call it yak attacks. That's jawboning. They're trying to create a certain sense of what they're doing. What percentage of Fed stuff is propaganda? I don't know if you can break it down to a percentage, but you can break it down as to, you're absolutely, that's what they're doing. They even say a Federal Reserve monetary tool is, quote, forward guidance. Yakking about what they're going to do. They played it brilliantly in 2013. They launched the biggest and baddest QE ever, and they immediately started talking about tapering it, ending it, and raising rates. And that kept the lid on people freaking out that the Fed had gone nuts, even though they had. And there was a time they were going nuts, printing $250 billion a month in QE. All right. Yeah, Roger, I don't know what you're talking about. What did Roger say here? It must be Australian humor. Fiona Whalen said Smaulgld and extortion note LOL. I don't get it. Roger, I'm not sure I understand the humor. I didn't get it. Well, some jokes are better. I guess if you don't get a joke, it's either not funny or it's not a joke. And I guess if it's not funny, it's not a joke. All right. I type in the link and nada. All right. I think that's it for tonight. I do want to thank everyone for joining me tonight. I do want to thank Fiona for the very precious gift here. I was able to share the pictures with you all. And also, if you got any questions or comments, please let me know. And we will see you tomorrow night. Any other comments here? Nope. Oh, no, I did miss one. Hold on. There's a question here from, it says JB Wentworth. Would you comment on the Federal Reserve's apparent expansion of its authority to move the equity market? In particular, article in Reuters discussed the Sham rule and MMT. I haven't read the article. I know Mario Draghi says that we should look at his monetary policy. He did talk about that. But I do also know that Janet Yellen, before she left the Fed, said that we may need to look at going into the equity markets. And she did talk about, she said that they weren't allowed to at the time that the Fed cannot buy equities, that they would have to go to the Congress to get that authority. Now, I suspect what's going to happen is, here's the other thing. I don't get this stuff. I actually listen and read all the Fed crap that they put out. I listen to the press conference with Powell. I listen to Mario Draghi's press conferences. That's how I'm able to imitate him. But what Powell said, if anybody remembers, and I did cover this, that, first of all, the minutes said that the Fed discussed at length about assets that they were thinking of buying, and they said that they had learned how to buy assets in the last QE, and maybe they should have bought more, and they've learned how to do it, and there weren't any adverse impacts, which means now that they've learned to drive drunk, they should do it more. And they were saying that the next time they need to do it, they know now how to do it. And then they were saying, but we should probably expand the type of assets that we buy. And that's what's under discussion. And Powell said sometime mid next year, they're going to have a study done, completed, about what they should be allowed to buy. And I guarantee you, well, I don't guarantee you, I can't guarantee you. I'll put up the gems as collateral, good collateral, and I'll put up some toxic loans I have. They'll probably want to buy corporate bonds. They'll probably want to buy stocks. And they're going to say, look, the Swiss National Bank does it. The European Bank has been more innovative than us. They've bought corporate bonds. They're going to say the Bank of Japan has bought ETFs. So why not us? Yeah, so that's probably coming. In fact, Powell did say, I don't want to go to negative rates, but I do want to buy assets So the Fed has basically said is somewhat is what I said 7-8 years ago, 5-7-8 years ago. The Fed probably didn't want to go below zero. The Fed wanted to have some space between its bonds and the other central bank's bonds, and it wants to be, if it wants to be the reserve currency, has to pay a rate of interest. And if it's going to do QE, it's going to buy stuff. And that's where it appears where we're headed. All right. Anything else? Yeah, Roger made a video. It's kind of cool. It has like a Smaulgld mug in it, a fake Smaulgld mug. And he has it unpublic, but I don't know why. It's a nice video. PT Platinum to the Moon. Coins is here. Yes, indeed, he is. Surprised he hasn't said that yet tonight. All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much. And I don't want to hear Bernie do a countdown. If not, I think he's a bit under the weather, so maybe he won't be able to do it. We'll say goodnight. Have a good night.